welcome, Mia.
Hi.
Thank you for agreeing. I think you're the first person that I'm having on that we had conversation in the Instagram about 75 hard, but other than that, I was just following you and I was like, I want to get you on because you have a lot of energy and I really like what you're doing.
Mhm.
Maybe you can describe a little what it is that you do or how you got into that.
Yeah, okay. So I'm basically a self-mastery coach because I believe mastering anything in life starts with mastering ourselves. And so I have really dug deep on how our subconscious works, how our conscious mind works, and how to work with them to create shifts in your life, powerful shifts. And so I focus on mindset and also manifestation. These two are like my favorite topics to talk about. So the reason I got into this because in my past, like I've been through a lot of abuse, I've been through a lot of trauma, PTSD, depression, and so I changed my life in less than 10 months with having a mentor for 3 months and also working on myself every day, and it was really uncomfortable. But I did it. I changed my life, and now everything that I needed to learn to be where I'm now, like I used to be a completely different person, and so where I am now, I've literally put everything into my program and into my coaching because I know what I did helped me. And so I believe in my work and to help others, basically. That's the short of it.
So like what would you say is, well, first, what helped you to actually start the changing? Because I think many times once you start changing, that's the first challenge, is to actually start changing, and then going further is actually being consistent. So like what was that helped you to start changing?
Yeah. For me, it was last year, actually in April, when the lockdown started here. It was like 2 weeks in. I was sick at home alone. And I think I just reached a really low point in my life where I was like, you know what? I'm just so sick of being sick and tired of my own stuff. Like I was just in so much pain of my suffering and my past, and I used to define myself from my past and my traumas. And I reached a point where it just one night I was crying in my bedroom and I was like, you know what? It just clicked. I was like, you know what? I'm done. Like, this is it. I am changing my life. And I think that moment was just like where I made the decision that I've had enough. And now it's time to change my life. Like, no one else will do it for me. It is up to me. Like they say, it's not our responsibility what happened to us, but it's our responsibility to change our lives, to heal
Yeah.
that. And so I took that responsibility in my hands because that's one of the biggest things that we need to change. And so I just began however I knew, whatever steps I could take,
Yeah,
I
that
just
was my next
began.
question. How did you actually like what? Okay, you make decision. I want to change, but then like
Yeah.
what then? Like what's the next step? Like how did you start changing, or how did you find ways to change? Like what was your approach?
Yeah. So it's very, people could say it's random, but I don't believe in random things. So I was scrolling on my phone that next day and I randomly saw this Boss Babe ad. And I was like, what is this Boss Babe thing? Like everybody talks about it on social media. And I was like, okay, I'll look into it. I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. Like a community of women. I was like, okay, I joined. I was like, I'll just do it. So I joined and that was like one of my first decisions. Then there were like these coffee chats every Friday where there are like 100, 200 women come into the coffee chat into Zoom. They give you these breakout rooms of like 3, 4 women and you share your story and you talk about yourself. And I was like, oh my God, I've never talked to a stranger about my past or anything. It was so freaking uncomfortable. But the more I started sharing and the support that I got from women and people saying like, oh, I felt the same or I've been through the same. And I was like, holy crap, like everybody's been through something like the suffering, but I don't have to give it meaning like it's bad. I can give it meaning like I'm going to use that for my future to help others. So that's where I saw that actually what I've been through, I could use that to help others. And so I was like, okay, now I know that I want to help others. I don't know how, but I'm going to give it a go. And I just started creating content on Instagram from what I've learned, my story, like my emotions and everything. I was just writing random stuff on Instagram. Next moment, I know it's July and I'm going through a knee surgery. I came back home, got on my phone again, randomly scrolling. I see an ad from Yes Supply, which is where I got my certifications from. I'm like, what is this Yes Supply? What's a coaching? Like, I didn't know what a
Yeah.
coach is. I was like, okay, there's a webinar. I will watch the webinar. I watched, like, it was like, I think 2-hour webinar. at the end of it, she was like making the offer, and I was like, this is it. Like, I know this is the decision. Even though it was such a huge amount of money, I was like, this is calling me. I'm just going to devote to it. I didn't have the resources. I just said, yes, I will find a way. Got into this coaching certification program. Didn't know what coaching was, didn't know if I like it. By the end of it, well, now I'm a coach.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of been with, I've trusted that whatever comes, like whatever sign or whatever comes, that it's the right decision. And I just take that step without having like worry or fear. I'm just taking those leaps every time.
So how you take those leaps without like worrying or like fearing? Because I think even like when you said about putting yourself out there, it's really like uncomfortable to do that. At least like the very, very first step. I know I had really big block about posting myself. I was like, oh, I just want to be private and just like I don't want to bother doing it because I did it like a few years ago and I was posting like twice a day and it was really time consuming. And I was
Mm,
like, oh, I don't want to do it. And in reality, I just had a block against it. And then I had a conversation with a friend when pretty much I was called out and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start posting. And then once I start, that's it. Like I just take off. But it's like taking that first initial step. I think many times it's really challenging. So, but from what you say, it just seems like, oh, I just did this, like as if it's like easy. But I know that it's not as easy. So, like, how you maybe overcome that resistance when you, let's say, when you start to put yourself out there or you share your story, how you overcome that? Because I think that's really important. That small moment when you before you do something, you do that, you have that resistance and you overcome it. So, like, how you managed to do that, or maybe what's the thought process you had as you were like starting to take those actions?
yeah. I would say it depends on the topic. So with the coaching program and with Boss Babe, it was kind of like just my intuition and I trusted it and it didn't seem fearful. It just felt like normal. I don't know how to explain it, but with putting myself out there, I remember I was so scared to like come on stories on Instagram and post my face or like even a picture of me. Like I used to just do stories in my captions and put like a picture and write. So in August, actually, last year was the first time I ever showed up on story on video. And right before then, I actually had someone from my coaching program who was ahead of me. She had already just like graduated. And she told me, she was like, okay, Mia, what's the worst thing that can happen? I was like, okay, well, maybe someone will judge me. Someone will maybe say a bad comment. Maybe I will lose some followers. And she's like, okay, but what's the best thing that can happen? I said, okay, well, maybe someone really needs to hear this today. Maybe I will help someone's day today. Maybe someone will smile from what I've said. She was like, okay, so what does outweigh what? And I was like, well, if I can help someone, that's my mission, that's my goal. She was like, okay, so don't worry about the judgment. Don't worry about what can go wrong. Just put yourself out there. And every single time now, like whether it was going on Instagram lives from the first time, whether it's doing an IGTV for the first time, I've always reminded myself that I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for the people who need me. And so wherever I have this fear of a new level or of doing something new, I'm like, I'm putting my ego aside and I'm saying, okay, someone out there needs to hear this today. If I don't do it, they're never going to hear it. They're never going to find the help that I need. So I'm just going to do it, even though there's fear and there's worry, but I also have tools myself to help with that. So I think it's just having a bigger mission than yourself is what will get you through these uncomfortable phases.
Ego.
Yeah.
So that is one really, really, I'm really interested in like ego and how you deal with it. And I've done a lot of work on myself about ego and stuff like that. So how you first, how you even notice when like your ego is pretty much getting in your way and how you deal with it, because I know it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. So ego is usually the part of us that's like the judging part, the one that feels the anxiety and the fear and the doubt. And I would say for me, it was all about aligning myself to what we call the higher self, which can be a new term for many, but it's basically the best version of ourselves inside of us. It's not something that's further away or not a part of us. It's actually within us, but we just haven't discovered it. And for me, really tuning into like that spiritual part of myself has been what has caused me to let go of the ego. So every day I do things that are tuning into my inner being and really stripping away that ego. And I know when I'm starting to judge myself or others, when I'm starting to complain or criticize, or when I feel anxiety or whatever fear, I know it's the ego trying to tell me, hey, like, don't do this, you're stupid, or you're weak, like what are you trying to do? No one's going to want to listen to you. It's just that inner voice that's trying to keep you safe, and trying to keep you where you are. But I know that doing work that's meaningful, it's going to take more than, you know, what my ego is trying to tell me. And I'm so just trying to put myself out there and constantly tune into my heart space, which is where our higher self lives.
And how you, let's say, how you become aware of that ego, because I think for you to be able to deal with it, or to manage it, you have to be aware when you actually, like as you said, when you have those negative thoughts or something like is getting in your way. So how you maybe raise awareness or maintain your awareness about having that ego or when it comes in.
I would say just noticing, like, when you're having a negative thought, or when you're having anxiety or fear or whatever it is, just noticing the thoughts that you're thinking. Um, just tuning into, like, okay, what am I thinking right now? What's the thought that is causing me this anxiety or this stress or this fear? And then asking yourself, what is that fear trying to tell me? What is that anxiety trying to tell me? Because usually there's actually something else underneath, and it's just coming out as fear or anxiety. So I, like, for me, it was just about tuning into my thoughts. When I'm feeling bad, what am I thinking? When I'm feeling good, what am I thinking? So when I'm feeling bad is the ego. When I'm feeling good is the higher self. And so I just tune into, based on the feelings, what are my thoughts? If it's a bad thought, how can I replace it with something that is more empowering and more like feel good thought for me? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Um, I know that for me, one thing that really helped was doing like daily reflections when I just sit down and look
Mm-hmm.
back on the day. Or I even realized like many things, like I, I naturally for years would identify myself as I'm really bad with like communicating or like socializing and stuff like that, because I was like really insecure, like anxious and things like that. But then like many times there was like really interesting question, which is pretty much like, how do you see me? I would write people and I would ask them, how do you see me, the good and the bad? And so many people said me I'm really good with like people, with communicating, and I'm like, what? Because like that's something that I, in my head, I was like, I'm not that good. But then like also with reflection, one thing that I did last year was each day, because I thought there's some kind of block or some kind of limiting beliefs I have there. I would just sit down and reflect on my conversations every day. And I would be like, okay, this is where I actually kind of project in that situation with my behavior, they response where they might not want to talk to me or something like that, but it's because of my actions. And I was like, oh, actually, I'm the one who is causing it. So like even simple thing like avoiding eye contact for years. I remember I wasn't even able to look person in the eye. I was just like this,
Mhm.
talking to them. I was so like shy, insecure, and I think that's because I was. And then when I started identifying myself as somebody who is like, well, I'm not that like confident when I talk to people and stuff like that. But then when I started getting people tell me like, you're really good at communicating and you're really good at like expressing your thoughts and like it's really easy to understand you, and like I'm like, what? And it wasn't just like one person, many people, and I'm like, okay, there's something there. I'm not seeing something. But it's really interesting how we put those on those glasses where we see the world, where like I think it's important to have that, sometimes to have that feedback from others where they give you some information that you might not even see. Like I had a friend who, it was years ago, same question. He responded that he sees me as a leader. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I was thinking about it for 2 weeks. I was like, wait, me as a leader? But then the longer I was thinking about it, the more I was like, well, maybe actually I could be a pretty good leader. But it's something that I would never consider if I didn't get that one message, because I
Mhm.
just couldn't see it. So like I think it's really important to have people around you that are able to, they have the best interest at heart for you, and they also can see things that you don't. And they will call you out as well, because one thing that has helped me was to have people that actually are calling me out and really trigger my ego, where I'm like literally close to crying or crying, but I know that I don't, I don't, I know I'm triggered, but I don't respond as a way I would if I wasn't aware that it's actually helping me. So
Mhm.
like I think it's important for people to be aware how other people are. like affecting them, but also um, be kind of picky with people that you surround yourself with. Like maybe you can talk more about how, um, because I even what you said about putting yourself out there, you were like in communities with like people supporting you, and I think it's really important, especially at the beginning when you start off, or like if you're really new in what you're doing, to have somebody who is like a mentor or like a coach that is helping you, or just like a friend that is just like supporting you. So maybe how you find those people, or um, yeah, just maybe you can start talking about what is how you can find them, or where you even look for them.
Yeah, I think it also comes naturally when you take these steps. Like with me joining Boss Babe, I had no idea who I'm going to surround myself with. I just saw the leaders of the Boss Babe, Natalie and Danielle, as like role models for me, and I was like, wow, like I want to be how they are, because people who follow me now or just joined my following, like they don't know that I used to be the shyest, most insecure, quiet girl. Like I was so insecure and shy. I didn't even want to like be in the groups around people. So like I used to see people as role models for me. And so in Boss Babe, talking to many women, I connected with other like-minded women, girls who have been maybe through the same. We opened up to each other. So I found some friends from there. Then when I joined the coaching community, I immediately got like a group of people to join me. So I just made a post. I was like, who wants to be my accountability partner? Because that's what our mentor suggested for us, like throughout the certification, to have someone as accountability. I didn't had no idea that like 15 women are going to message, and I said, okay, I'm just going to make like a group message. So then I had a group of people like supporting me. We were always giving each other advice. From there I found like two accountability partners who were like more close to me, and we met weekly. So we made a commitment every week to meet, to practice our techniques. I got friends from there. And so I think even showing up on Instagram, I found more people following me. I started, and also I think the more inner work you do, like the people around you will shift. So you will start to see who's more toxic, who you should let go of in your life. Maybe new people will come because now you've made room by letting go of the relationships that don't work for you anymore. You've made room for new. And so I've had people come and go throughout this transformation journey, but I know it's just part of the process of up leveling yourself, and your tribe will up level too. And I think just being more active on social media and asking for help, or just, being like, hey, well, who would like to partner up with me, or who would like some accountability? And I think that's how we make connections that we have no idea of. And I usually trust that whoever comes to my life is, here for a reason, and we are meant to connect. And so I kind of just let it flow. But I think it starts with putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, and being like, hey, who would like to partner up? It was so uncomfortable for me, but that's how I found my new friends. And so I think the more we connect online, the more we can make, because I mean, right now you cannot physically meet up with people, but
Yeah,
I think that's how I did it.
I think it's actually like as you were speaking, I was thinking like, how do I get like positive, like-minded people around me? Because I know that my social circle has changed, and I'm really picky with people I surround myself with. And I have had people ask me like, where do you find those people? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I just like I see somebody, I reach out to them. I know that one thing I started doing. It's like I finished sports psychology degree, and before I came here, I was back in Latvia, and I was like, I heard about sports psychology and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I remember I was looking at unis because you can't study sports psychology in Latvia. And one person who was helping me with like applications, she said me that there's really good unis in UK, and I'm like, okay, cool. So I went, did my research, and I started to um, write people asking about like their experience in uni and whether they can get a job and stuff like that. One city they said like it took me like 4 months to get a job. I'm like, okay, that is done. I'm not going there next. And I remember I was reaching out to some sports psychologists. I think that was like one of the first times I would write somebody who is like developed in their career, and I would be like, okay, I can ask them a question about like, I don't know, whether they can suggest me some unis or which unis are better, or maybe some advice when it comes to like studying and something like that. And I remember the first email that came back, I was so afraid to open it because I didn't know what they will respond. And I remember that guy, he was like, "Oh, we can jump on a call and I can like give you some advice or give you some feedback. Maybe if you want, you can come to one of my labs and stuff like that." And I'm like, "Whoa, somebody who doesn't know me wants to help me." And I remember I started doing more and more, and I would get like calls with entrepreneurs or like some coaches or mentors with just like asking them, being like, "Hey, my name is Austra. I'm thinking maybe to start a business. Can you give me any advice?" And they would just respond and be like, "Oh, we can get a call." And I'm like, "Wow, okay." And I would just get a lot of information just by doing it. But I don't know how I started doing it. I think I was really curious. I wanted to understand how to get ahead or what I'm missing. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
really feel like I have anybody to go to. So I was like, well, I might as well search online. But it's interesting how me, as somebody that I didn't identify as being social or like confident being around people or talking to people, I would go and do those things, which is like really outside of my comfort zone. And like maybe you can also relate to this, because one thing that I have noticed about myself is that somehow I always find a way to get myself out of comfort zone. As much as I'm identify myself as this like years back, I would be like, okay, so I am getting good marks in school, pretty much like among the best in the class for years. Then I would get in uni with like scholarship. I just gonna get good marks. I'm gonna finish uni. I'm gonna get a good job. Like I was just that person who is like super comfortable. I wanted to always be comfortable, but at the same time, I would always find something that is out of my comfort zone. And somehow, I don't know why, but I would always feel like I have to do something that's outside of my comfort zone, even though I didn't want to do those things. But for some reason, I was like, yeah, I want to do something that's uncomfortable. Even like coming here, I was flying for the first time when I was coming here, and I was living alone for the
Mm.
first time. And I was pretty much like providing myself the whole time while studying full time uni. And I didn't, like many students, they have financial support for like living expenses. I didn't get it. So I had to provide myself. I had like no support.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the more I get to, somehow I don't know why, but the more comfortable I feel, the more I start to seek something that's putting me outside of comfort zone. I don't know, maybe that's something you might relate to, but I know it's, I've been really curious about how does it work, because naturally I just want only comfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, first of all, when you said about confidence, confidence is not something that you either have or not. I think confidence, they say, is a habit. So
Yeah.
it's just making that first action and then the next action. And that's how confidence comes. Like no one is either confident or not confident. Like it's something that everyone can have. And that's something that sometimes is maybe misunderstood, because confidence is what everyone can have. And with the comfort zone, there's a part of you that just wants to grow and knows that it's human nature to grow and evolve. And so you're putting yourself in those positions where, like they say, get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that's what you've done. And so that's really awesome. And um, basically, what drives every human, what Tony Robbins teaches, is six primal needs. And, everyone has different primary ones, like one or two. So maybe yours could be certainty, but at the same time, uncertainty. So you want variety, but you also want to be comfortable. So your two could be those ones. So I think it's different for everyone. Some people really want to be comfortable, and maybe they also want to be significant. So it's very different. And I think for you, it's just a part of you wants to be comfortable and a part of you wants to grow. And so there's like a tug of war. What are we going to do next? And I think that's just how you work. And there's people who don't want to be uncertain and don't want to have variety. So maybe they seek for love and connection, and they seek certainty. So there's different needs for every human. And that's just how you work.
Um, I wanted to also talk about the manifestation, because I've seen you
Hmm.
post a lot about it and how you attract things in your life. How does it work, and what is the how would you define manifestation?
Hmm. So essentially, what I would say manifestation is basically just bringing something tangible that you want into reality. And it comes with so many different aspects to it. It's not just like I wish for something and it comes, or I want something and it comes. It's actually a lot of inner work. So that's why my mindset and manifestation go together. because first, to manifest something, you would have to become that person, and you can't become that person, that vibration, unless you have those limiting beliefs that are holding you back, unless you have those negative emotions that are holding you back. So it really comes through aligning our thoughts, our words, our beliefs, our values, our identity to those desires that we have, to those wants. So in manifestation world, they say you don't attract what you want, but you attract what you are. So working on what you are every day to manifest what you dream of, basically.
Um, so how you get, let's say, how one gets to that level of um vibrancy, or what was the word, I forgot.
Vibration,
Where,
yeah.
yeah, so like how, let's say they're at low level, how do they even get to that level that they want to get, or that they need to get to start attracting things that they want to attract?
Yeah. So for me, it was starting work on myself back a year ago and until January. So I did the inner work until January, until like I began manifesting what I want. But the thing here is we manifest every moment. So whether we realize it or what or not, we're always manifesting. So if we are at a lower level, we maybe don't believe that we're worthy enough, or we don't like, we focus on the negative or what we don't want, we're still attracting that too. So we're always attracting. It's just, are we attracting what we want, or are we attracting what we don't want? And so for me to get to a place where I'm not attracting what I don't want, I'm attracting what I want, it took me months of inner work. So really being aware of my patterns from the past, releasing those patterns, being aware of my limiting beliefs, releasing those limiting beliefs, like starting a new identity, working on my new identity, changing my daily thoughts, my words, my habits, everything to align myself to that version of me who has those dreams that I have. So, like a question that I ask myself all the time that could be useful is, what would the Mia that I want to do be today? What would she do today? What would she say today? What would she believe about herself? Like that's how you align yourself to the dreams. You just kind of try to be that person already now. And that
Yeah,
takes
I
a
think
lot
it's
of
similar
work.
to what like Brandon Bouchard said about like setting intention as well. That like, let's
Hmm.
say before you do something, you set intention for the day or for the task or for the meeting. Um, so like one, let's say with manifestation, is it possible that uh so let's say you get yourself to that level and then you start attract those things. So is it like a conscious process when you consciously start to attract, or it's just happening naturally without you like being conscious about it? So is there, how much of it, I don't know like how to put it, but how much of it is that actually naturally happening and you like controlling it?
Yeah. So you do put in conscious work, but you also subconsciously all the time attract. And that's how a lot of the times what we don't realize about manifestation is if you're consciously trying to manifest, but subconsciously you have all these things holding you back, you cannot manifest. And so consciously we can create a vision, we can do all these manifestation tools like scripting or visualizing or meditation or whatever it is, but subconsciously we also have to believe that we're worth that we deserve that we are capable of achieving that. So there is conscious work, but there's also subconscious work that needs to be done daily for you to be manifesting things that you desire.
So how you shift that not believing or not believing that you're good enough or you deserve those things, how you shift that towards, because that, I think once you shift that, it's, I don't know if it makes it easier, but it makes it a bit more, like it makes just better to move forward once you have that belief that I'm actually worth it. And it also affects your actions that you take, because once you believe that, well, it's, there's like Andy Frisella, he said really well that pretty much like a question of, if you knew that you can get exactly what you want in 10 years, how
Hmm.
how much different would be your actions today? If you knew there's no chance you will not get it, like no
Yeah.
chance. And like, I think there's that what you said about shifting that believing in yourself. I think that's really important. But how somebody who doesn't believe in themselves, they're like, well, it's not for me, I can't do it, and yada yada, all these things. How do they shift? Because I think once they are in that place, many times it's like it's really hard to even paint the picture for them where they can get, because they are so much in the world, they, and they have never even seen how it is not to be in that world. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you help them to shift that like belief in themselves?
Yeah. So that's literally where my coaching comes in, because my program is built in a way that manifestation is the very last thing that we work on. And before we work, over half of the program is about letting go of the old, the limiting beliefs. And so I have techniques like timeline therapy, which is the strongest one, or hypnotherapy, to work on those childhood conditionings to let go of those limiting beliefs, because we can do actually exercises that help consciously with limiting beliefs. But if you go subconsciously, which subconscious is 90% of our mind, conscious is just 10%. So once we work on the 90% with techniques in the NLP world, like timeline therapy or hypnotherapy, we can actually go in and let go of these things. So, like I just did with a client today, her biggest limiting belief is like she's not good enough. And so I did the timeline therapy for her, which she went back to a time when she was 7, and she decided that she's just not good enough, related to a situation that happened. And so once we released that, she came back from the like out of the therapy part, and she was like, "Wow, I feel so much lighter." It's because we're carrying so much baggage around for years, and finally to release that, that's the only way you can now put new on top. So I don't believe in starting everything new on top and still having these old beliefs. Otherwise, the weed still grows through the grass or the flowers that you put. So I basically believe that we have to really do the uncomfortable first, like work first, to get to a place where, okay, now I can start to believe in new things, because I feel like that's not me anymore. It's like just old version of me.
Yeah, it's like many people out there like, oh, I want results, but I don't want it to work. And
Yeah,
I'm
and
like,
that's not
yeah,
how
well,
it
it's not
works.
how it works. I've had many people, or even like, let's say when you start working with people, or not even before starting working, many times I can sense that they're not even ready to do the work. They just expect that if they pay the money, I will fix them. And I'm like, well,
Hmm.
it's not the way it works. I can give you the tools and information and everything, but you're the one who has to do the work. So like and usually what I say is like you have to find ideally at least 1 hour a day to work on yourself if you are really intentional about changing yourself. Otherwise, if you have no time to work on yourself, there's no point to try and start working on it, because it takes consistent work. It's not just like, okay, I'm gonna do it twice and I'm done, I just don't have any more time. And I'm like, no, you have to find time. Because like I think it's many people have that block that they don't have time, but it's like, well, the thing is that once you actually change yourself, you'll be a different person. So you won't even have the same life anymore. So maybe you will be able to get yourself in a place where you actually have a lot of time, but you have to do that work first. Um, and like what you said about the letting go part. Um, so what's the approach? Is it like you let go first, or can you let go first as you build up the new like beliefs or things like that?
Yeah. I would say with time as well, it's about priorities. Like everyone,
Yeah.
like I talked to my clients as well. Like I had a client 2 days ago, and she just started a program, and she's like, well, I don't know if I have time. I was like, okay, so how long do you watch Netflix for in a week? She's like, well, actually hours. And I was like, okay, what if you take that 30 minutes and you do your homework? Does that sound something like you can do? Well, yeah, so I think it's down to time, is down to priorities. Like what
Oh
really
yeah.
is important. Are you important for yourself? If you are, you would make that time. Or is Netflix more important than you? So I think it's about priorities.
Wait, so what if they are not, they don't see themselves as important? Like, let's say, at what point you know that maybe they are not ready to get help yet? Because I think it's important to that's one thing that I have learned, because I would always try to help everybody, like help everybody, get them better. But with time, what I have learned that is that I can help somebody who is not willing to first be helped, or get to a better place, and second, to put the work in themselves. So like, how you see if somebody is ready to work on themselves?
I'd say it has to come from within. Like I'm not one to force my coaching or my advice on anyone. I think you would have to get to a place in your life, whether, so they say it's leverage. So either there's so much pain that you want to change, or the change that you want to make would be bring so much pleasure that you want to change. So it's either pain or pleasure that will drive us to change. And so I think it really comes down to changing, like you want to do it yourself, not your mom telling you, not your partner telling you, not your friends telling you, but it's like, okay, I've had enough of the pain, or I really want that pleasure, and then I change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how the change works because usually the place where people are, they are, well, they're comfortable or it's good enough. And like I've been doing some reading on the change and how the change works, or because I think it's, especially when you, that's one thing that I was really frustrating for me, because many times people are like, but I want to change, I really want to change, I'm just tired of my life, and then the next day they are back to their old ways and they just live the same way, and I'm like, so wanting is not enough. If you want to change, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times it's not enough. So like where is that place where you actually it is enough? Because like I know myself is that even like getting in shape, I was like, yeah, I can't do it, like I really want to, but it's not possible for me, and I would just have those limiting beliefs, until I was called out, and pretty much I would realize that, well, um, I'm responsible for getting myself and my body where it was, and I'm responsible for getting it to a better place. But taking that responsibility, that is something that is so uncomfortable and a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
so painful, because we just want to avoid taking that responsibility, because then it says that, well, it's our fault that we are where we are. And you don't want to admit that, like, well, my life is shit and it's my fault. Like, so like maybe how can you might even talk about your experience, because you also mentioned taking responsibility. Like, what helped you to take responsibility for your life and actually moving forward, be more intentional? Because I think once you take responsibility, it's more likely that you will take action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard this quote a year ago, and it's just stuck with me ever since. And it also something that we are taught in our coaching program. It's, life is happening for you and not to you. And I sat with that quote, I think, for weeks last year, and I was like, life is happening for me. Like, how did that like abuse happen for me? I was like, it doesn't just make sense how people would hurt you and that is happening for me. And I was just like, I was like, in my own mind trying to make sense of everything. And I was like, okay, if it's happening for me, it was there to teach me something. So then I could take that lesson and put it into my mission or my purpose and my practice. And then I was like, okay, if it happened for me, that means my life is my creation. And basically, I started understanding that from those trauma patterns is what beliefs I took over. And my beliefs were like, I'm not good enough for anything. I'm dependent, that I'm alone, and that I always need other people to prove my worth. And I was like, okay, well, if I want to change my life around, I would have to be the one approving myself. I would have to be the one loving myself. I would have to be the one showing myself compassion. And these things were so new to me. Like, I didn't love myself. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't want to look at myself. And I think taking responsibility was hard. Like you said, it was like the hardest thing to do, because I realized then my success depends on me, but
Yeah,
also
and I also can't
if
blame
I'm not,
anybody.
yeah, and I can't blame anyone else. And it's just me, myself, and I. And I think it's very, very uncomfortable, but also then I started to focus more on, okay, if I'm responsible and it's up to me, then I just want to make sure I do everything in my power to be where I want to be. And I think also you can see it as something that's uncomfortable and, you know, negative, or it's draining, but also I chose to see it in a way that, okay, it's up to me. I'm going to do all I can. I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow, I'm going to do the uncomfortable stuff. Even when it's hard, I'm not going to give up, because the dreams that I put myself were what kept me going. And I'm like, okay, it's not up to anyone, not up to my mentor, not up to my accountability partners. I still need to put the work in if I want to change my life. And I think for me, it came down to having an exciting vision to work towards too.
So how did you create that like exciting vision?
So I think for me, it started with asking myself, okay, I've seen the worst. I know what I don't want to live like, what I don't want to feel like, what I don't want to believe myself about. And I was like, okay, what do I want instead? Okay, I want to feel happy. I want to feel strong. I want to be independent. I want to feel worthy. And I was like, okay, how am I going to get there? And so that's how, like, I think the how came. I just started working on what can I do every day to make myself happy? What can I do every day to feel love for myself or to show love for myself? And it's like, I think the little things in our days that made that difference, like over time.
With the uh wait, I lost my thought. I wanted to ask about that when you were changing. I think the big challenge is about not, and especially when you start to put yourself out, that not caring about like what other people think. And like I assume, I might be wrong, but maybe in the past you were like really caring about other people think, and assume that now you care about it less, or maybe focus on that
Mhm.
less. So like maybe how did you get that shift? Because I think it's, for me it has been really important shift where I don't focus, and I'm still working on it. Like I'm a people pleaser naturally, so it's still like a work in progress. But like where you maybe care less or don't pay as much attention to like what other people like think about you. How do you shift that, or maybe how you have changed when it comes to that?
Hmm. Yeah, I was a major people pleaser as well, because people pleaser is something that comes from our inner child. So I now teach my clients too how to heal their inner child. But I think for me, it's because in childhood we are validated for doing things for others, and we're not as much validated for who we are, just by ourselves. And so we tend to create these basically sources of worthiness and approval from others. And so it always depended on others to feel worthy, or I depended on my achievements to feel worthy. And so how I started working on that is literally, when I hired my mentor, what we did was the inner child healing, and I became aware of like the main 5 inner child wounds that we have. And it's not something that you can just forever delete. Like, we're always, there will always be a part of you that's the people pleaser or the perfectionist or the rescuer who's trying to save everyone. It's just inner child wounds, but it's seeing those wounds as a positive. So people pleaser, their positive is they know how to communicate with people, they know how people are like, because they're trying to please everyone, so now they know how to be like a bridge for people, or a perfectionist. They wanted everything to be the best, so now they know how to put a lot of effort in, they know how to make things with heart. Like, it's about seeing the positive in that, like negative, you would say, but it's not so negative. It's just learning to live with that, and it's not something that you can forever just delete. So I was like, okay, if I can't delete that, I'd rather make peace with that part of me and be like, okay, how can I use it to my strength? And
How
so,
did you make that peace? Because I think it's really, really important to learn to do that.
yeah, for me, it came down to healing my inner child and really connecting to my inner child. Like, looking at, let's say, I would take a picture of me when I'm 5 years old, and I look at myself and I'm like, okay, I'm doing this for her. If I say mean things to myself, I'm saying mean things to her. If I'm caring about other people's opinion, she will get hurt too. And so I'm always trying to have in the back of my mind that little part of me, that little girl. And so whenever I'm doing something, like I told you, I think everything that we do comes down to the why and the mission. And so there will always be judgment. There will always be people's opinions. It's not something that will never disappear. And I think the more you put yourself out there, the more judgment there can come. But it's about reminding yourself why you're doing this and focusing on the people that you're helping. And so I know there's always opinions. I know there's always judgment, but I choose not to focus on that. And I think for me, it came down to healing that part of me and accepting for myself as I am, like fully, and not just the good parts of me, but the bad parts of me. And I think that comes with inner work, like deep, uncomfortable inner work.
So like if you don't focus on those things, what is it that you focus towards, and how you um maybe remain focusing on it, and not to go back to like, oh my gosh, I had this negative comment, or like,
Yeah. For me, it's about, like, let's say someone messages me, hey, like what you posted today made my day. Or someone messaged me like, hey, like I love your energy. Your energy keeps me going. And just those messages, like I really appreciate those messages, because that shows me that what I'm doing is helpful. And whatever bad comes, I choose not to focus on that. So sometimes I could, like, I used to, before when I first started, I used to like save the messages that I received from people or the comments that like really made me like feel appreciative for where I'm at and what I'm doing. Like I would either put them on my laptop or I would print them out and put them on my wall. So I always remember and I look at the good and I don't look at the bad, because when I know manifestation and I know how the energy works, if I focus on the bad, there more will come. And so I choose not to like focus on those comments, and I choose to focus on the good. And that energy will attract more of that energy. So I try to always keep my energy high, and no matter what comes, I'm still me. And I'm still doing what I'm doing. I'm not going to change who I am just because someone said, like, hey, I think your dancing is stupid, or hey, I think that post was stupid. So I think about it, it's being conscious with what you're paying attention to.
I have heard also that um, there's an approach where you actually like save or write out all those negatives as well, where you can see like see how many people were doubting me or telling me like something negative, and I still keep going. So like
Mhm.
even if you get something negative, you can still get positive out of it. Um,
Mhm.
at least that's the way I have been learning to approach it as well, with like rejection or some negativity or something like that. But I think one thing that I have noticed within myself is that actually I stop focusing on those things when I start to focus on myself. Because when you start to focus
Mhm.
on yourself and you are so, I don't want to say busy, but like occupied with working on yourself, developing yourself, like helping other people, you don't really have time to pay attention to those things because you're like
Yeah.
so productive with things that you're doing that you just, for me, that's something that I noticed because then, which for me, it was really hard to, it was like challenging to actually put myself first. Um, and
Mhm.
and I would feel really guilty at the very beginning about like putting myself first or like saying no and stuff like that. But then the ironic part was that the more I started working on myself and putting myself first, the more I was able to help people without trying to help them. So I would have a conversation with a friend and I'm like, oh, I'm doing this, and they're like, oh, I also want to try doing this, and I'm like, okay. So like I actually was helping somebody more without trying to help them, just by being myself and focusing on me, which is something that I never expected would happen. I was thinking that if I put myself first, then everybody gonna think that I'm selfish, I'm this and that. So like, but then when I started doing it, I'm like, wow, this is actually amazing. And I felt so amazing just being so, it's like I got in a bubble where I was just so focused on myself that nothing around me was really like, I just didn't have time to think about something else or like some negativity. I was like, well, you're just projecting your insecurities on me. So it's like I didn't get
Yes.
affected by those because many people that give you negativity, it's like that's their insecurities, not yours, because they just sit home and do nothing while you go out there and you put in work and you uplift people, support them. So it's like well, that's them. Like most of them, they just don't have enough, well, I don't want to say life, but they don't do enough things to be, I think once you focus on yourself, you don't even spread any negativity, or you don't, well, maybe at the very beginnings of your self work you might be a bit negative because it's a hard work. um
Yeah.
which is something that I noticed when I was doing work on myself, because I didn't really have any mentors. I started doing self work when I was like, I don't know, 14, 15, when I would like be, okay, something is not good with me, like I'm not, like I'm really insecure and stuff like that, and I had nobody to go to, so I just started reading books and doing self work, and like I would just get down that negative loophole where I was like, oh, so I'm like this because this happened. Then I start feel bad about that fact and I get even lower. It's like that's when I was like, yeah, if you want to work on yourself, better have somebody who is like helping you to do that. Otherwise you just get attached to this like negative story and you just go down. But
Mhm.
like it is interesting how that negativity, because even myself with starting to put myself out there, now that I post more, I'm like, well, I'm not even focused on like comments or whether people like it or not. I'm so focused on just creating that I just don't have
Mhm.
time to like check all the negative comments. Well, I don't really have negative comments so far. I just have positives, which is like amazing. And I didn't even like
Mhm.
the interesting part was that I got like many people supporting me and being like, wow, your content is amazing, this and that. And I'm like, I didn't even expect that. Like for me,
Mhm.
it was just to get myself out there. And I was like, no expectation, just be consistent, post content, like support people, whatever. But then getting that positive feedback, I'm like, wow, it's actually helping people. Like I'm actually helping people that can
Mhm.
just get help by watching some videos. So I think it has really been changing the way I look at those things because um well it's just pretty much our like limiting beliefs. So like let's say when it comes to limiting beliefs or even like overthinking, how can one become aware of the limiting beliefs they have? Because I think many times we don't even see them. We just think like you said about your client, oh, this is just the way I am. So like
Mhm.
how you help them to see that, well, this is just a limiting belief. It's not actually the way you are.
Yeah. So I try to always remind them that, the thoughts that we have, they're not us. Like we don't have to identify with our thoughts. Our thoughts are just thoughts and we are the thinker of our thoughts. And so one like simple thing could be asking yourself like, okay, if there were no limits, where would I want to be? You write down your dream, your goals, whatever it is, and then you ask yourself, okay, what is stopping me from getting there? Or why do I believe that I can't get there now? And so you kind of write down, I don't deserve that. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. Whatever comes, that's usually your limiting belief. And then you ask yourself, okay, is this a fact or is this my opinion of
Mm.
things? Usually it's not a fact. Usually it's just our opinion of things. And that's how you understand that these are your limiting beliefs. And so you start to work on them. And that's like a really simple, basic exercise that you can do to find your limiting beliefs. But I think it comes down to really understanding how your thoughts work and how your words are powerful and how your beliefs shape your reality. So I think that's how you could maybe, the listeners now could do some work on themselves just with this.
I remember like a few years ago I had like when it comes to like limiting beliefs, I had a conversation with a friend when I was like, okay, so if you had all the money and all the time in the world, what would you do with your life? And she was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, on the weekends. And I'm like, who said that you don't have the week off? So
Yeah.
like, like you already have this thinking that you have time
Yeah.
only on the weekends. And I'm like, see, this is already some limiting belief or the way you limit yourself because I told you you have all the time and
Mm-hmm.
all the money. Well, on the
Yeah.
weekends, I would do this and that. And I'm like, see, this is how you limit yourself. But well, it's pretty much like conditioning. And I think awareness has been really huge for me and like raising that awareness. That's why like I also asked you questions about becoming aware of those things because I think if you're not aware, the way I describe awareness usually is like if you were in a dark room and I would throw you a ball, like you wouldn't catch it. You just can't see it. But then like
Mm-hmm.
once you switch the light on, like you can see it and you can catch it. And that's like all the limiting beliefs, all the like I don't know, negativity or some patterns that you're not aware of. You need to switch that light on. Or like turn on the light. I don't know the English specific terms. I'm not like first language, but still I think when you are able to raise that awareness, for me it has been really helpful. But like another thing for me was to have a mentor or somebody who sees things that I don't see, that they are
Mm-hmm.
like, well, right now you're just pretty much like whining and avoiding to actually do this. And
Mm-hmm.
like what works for me is being like really called out when it's not just like, well, I see that there's a possibility of something like this happening or whatever, but it's like, well, this is bullshit. Like what you're doing right now, this is not going to get you where you want to get.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, which is a bit extreme. Um, but I think it's also important to be aware of like, let's say, um, with what kind of mentor you want to get, because for somebody else, they might close off and they're not listening when it like let's say a mentor has that kind of approach. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
also important, and again it comes back to awareness, like to understand like what actually works on you. Because let's say when it comes to training and having a trainer, for somebody it works when they are really shouting at you and like pumping you up. For somebody else, they just need somebody who is like there for them and just supports them. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important, like let's say when somebody is looking for a mentor or a coach, to know what actually works on you, um,
Mm-hmm.
or like what is it that you actually would want to get from them. Because i have I have had conversations with like let's say when I'm searching for a mentor and I'm like, this is what I would expect from you, and they're like, then with that within that conversation I can see that this is probably not what I'm after. Not in a
Mhm.
way that they provide bad support, it's just not what I need. um,
Mhm.
and for me it has been really helpful to actually be able to find the right people that um, can give me what I need, because uh, I know what doesn't work on me. For me, it doesn't work when I get like, "Oh, you got this," and like motivational things. For me, it doesn't
Mhm.
work because I know that, let's say, with having high standards, when somebody says that, "Well, you're doing really good already," and I'm like, "Yeah, but like that's not the standard I want to be at." So, and like I think for me, it was also learning not to um, be okay where I am and not to beat myself up. So like
Mhm.
a lot of times what I have seen is that uh, within myself and people that I work with, that you are not happy with, or like let's say you identify having high standards with beating yourself up, which is like,
Mhm.
well, if I don't have high standards, then I will not be beating myself up. But if I have high standards and I'm not there, it means that I have to beat myself up. And I'm like, well, it's not like that you have one or the other. there's like
Yeah.
there's a place between. But and like that's, and another interesting thing was like, okay, if you have high standards, many times it's not because you have high standards, it's because if you don't hit those high standards, now you have a reason to beat yourself up. So naturally your default is to beat yourself up. So now you just found a
Mhm.
way to start beating yourself up, because now you have these super high standards that you know you can't meet, at least you don't believe you can't meet them. And now once you
Mhm.
don't do them, you just get back to that like, oh, I'm beating myself up. So it's like a
Mhm.
self-fulfilling prophecy, but many times people are not even aware of it. Because I
Mhm.
tell them like, I'm never about having low standards, like never. You want to have high standards, but you don't want to beat yourself up for where you are. You want to accept that, okay, this is where I am. um, if you're not happy with it, it's my fault, but it's my responsibility to get myself to where I want to be. And that's where you start to progress without being too negative along the way. Um, my mentor told me a really good way to approach it. Whenever you have something that you're not happy with, be like, oh my God, amazing, I have a new project to work on. Self esteem.
Mhm.
Wow, my self esteem is crap. Awesome. I have a new project to work on. So then, like, you take it a bit less personally. You don't identify as, like, oh my gosh, I have low self esteem. I have so much work to do. I don't know how I'm going to get there. But it's like, wow, I have a new project to work on. And it has been really
Mhm.
helpful for me not to beat myself up and be like, okay, this is just another project. I just work on myself.
Mhm. That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, like even with the, I don't know if I told you about when we were talking about 75 hard, about another thing that I learned from him was not to look at things as hard, but to look at them as fun.
Mhm.
So like just switch one word. So now you're like, oh my gosh, this is hard. Wow, this is fun. So you actually start to enjoy the hard things. And it's just the
Yeah.
perspective. And you're like, I know that for years, I don't even remember when is the first time I started thinking it. I literally would always have this one sentence in my head: the harder, the better. I don't know
Mhm.
why. I have no idea where it came from, because naturally I was just like comfort. But I just
Yeah.
had that thought, the harder the better. And like it
Mhm.
was even when I was, I don't know, when I was 10 years old, I was in basketball and I was starting to wake up at like 5 a.m. to do my own workouts, which not it came from insecurities. But it was really helpful because within few years of doing it, I would train like in the winter, outside. Within few years, I was the only player playing with no breaks. And and I remember, I think even at that time, I was like, the harder the better, the harder the better. But like I think many times it we just want to, especially nowadays when we have really comfortable lifestyles. Like, why would you want to go the hard way when you can go the easy way? But I think like one challenge that I have seen is that people with there's that instant gratification mindset where you're so used to getting everything straight away that it's hard to not apply that mindset when it comes to like self work or self development or like building your career, because that takes work and that takes time and that takes patience. um so like maybe how would how would you approach it, or how would you tell somebody to approach it when it comes to like working on yourself? Because I know that many people, they just want to get results like this, but it's not the way it works. So like how would you even, let's say when you have a client that is like, okay, so I want to get results by Friday next week, like how do I get this done? Like how you explain them the process, or like how would you explain the process of self development or working on yourself in general? Like what does it entail?
Yeah. I always say that this is not something you can do in 3 months, 6 months. I would say, our healing and our development takes our whole journey, like our whole lifetime. We're always growing, we're always learning. And it's not something that you're like, okay, 1 week and I'm done. Like I'm perfect, I'm good. It's not like that, because every time you grow a level, there will be new beliefs, there will be new limiting beliefs, there will be new stuff holding you back. And it's always being like, it's a constant work in progress that we are. And so whenever someone asks me like, hey, I think 3 months is too long, like can we make just 2 weeks? And I was like, no. In 2 weeks we can maybe work on one topic, but look how much goes
Maybe.
goes into us, like there's so much that we need to uncover and we need to work on and build again from zero then. So I think changing ourselves is just a lifelong process, and that's what I always tell my clients and whoever asks me. It's not something that
Yeah, but
takes,
like, what if I
okay,
told
we'll
you,
do
well,
further.
but like, what do you mean lifelong process? So you want now to like, I start the work and I will not be done in like few months? Like, why? Like, what kind of service is that? Like, you don't fix me in 3 months, because like, I think it's many times with, again, I was listening, I think a few weeks ago, one episode where Andy Frisella was talking about the mindset shift he had, that when he said to himself that I'm okay with working really hard for the rest of my life. That's when it shifted, that he didn't look for the end of it. Because I think many
Hmm.
times what happens is that, let's say, and I think it's a challenge when you're like a coach or a mentor, to explain people that this is not like a 1 week thing. Like it's not that we gonna work for like 3, 6, 12 months and then you're done. You can just chill and you're gonna be a different person. It's You're just gonna get back to your old ways. But it's something that takes like a lot of work. And like many times people are like, well, what do you mean? So you want to tell me that I will have to do this for the rest of my life? And it's like, well, yeah, but I think one thing that's important is that beginning process where you start doing that work. I i had a client who, at the very beginning, every time after work, watching TV for hours, having like some bad habits, not reading and things like that. And then within few months, we would have conversation and she's like, well, we I don't even know where the remote is anymore. Like we just don't watch TV. And she's like reading a lot. She's like completely different person. And I think like it's important for people to start that journey and start to see some results, to be like, wow, this is actually really amazing and it's really interesting to like work on yourself and see that you're getting better. And once they are in that place when they actually see themselves getting better and changing, if they look back on themselves, or even like some things they did before, I think that's when they might be, it's more likely they'll be hooked to that like lifelong learning, because they just start to see like, wow, this is actually working. So I think it's enough for them to have those initial results when they're like, wow, I'm a
Hmm.
different person. But I think the more work they do on themselves, the more they see that it's not like few months thing, because they see more and
Yeah.
more things. So like maybe another thing I wanted to ask you before was how you, let's say, I think many times I have also seen this with people, is that when you tell them you have to work on yourself, or like you have this and this and this, that I noticed that you might work on yourself or whatever, they feel really overwhelmed, especially at the beginning when they start to raise that awareness and they're like, oh my gosh, this is wrong with me, this is wrong with me, this is wrong with me. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm such a mess. So like, and many times people start to feel like overwhelmed, and that's where they stop, because I think this is going to be so much work. So like how you help them maybe not to feel overwhelmed, because that's something that I have seen pretty much with everybody who's starting on their journey. They, once they become aware, they're like, whoa, there's so much to work on.
Yeah. I would say, to finish with the last topic, is falling in love with the progress, falling in
Oh
love
yeah.
with the process. In terms of work and overwhelm, Like I always tell my clients, celebrate every little step. And I think the more we celebrate each thing that we become aware of, each thing that we start to shift, each new habit, whatever it is, the more we celebrate ourselves and notice these things, like our nervous system will be like, hey, that felt good. Like, let's do it again. And so the more I always try to like be like, okay, like we did a technique, let's say today, and she released a limiting belief. And I'm like, okay, how do you feel right now? I'm feeling much lighter. And I was like, okay, remember that feeling. That's how you feel every time you conquer a limiting belief or you make that new step. And so I'm trying to make that process for them so that they enjoy it and they kind of celebrate it along the way. Because if we go through this process and we focus on, oh my God, there's so much to work on and there's so much overwhelm, then it will become more and more harder to do the work. And I think that's why falling in love with the process is where it's at, because the more we celebrate each little step, the more we feel good about every new thing that we learn about ourselves. It becomes like, I would say, like a journey of curiosity. I'm like, ooh, like I achieved
Yeah.
this. Like I'm curious what's gonna happen next now. You make it like fun and playful, I think is how I like to make that.
Yeah, I think I approach it the same way because I look at it as a game and be like, okay, so
Mm-hmm.
now that I did this, what else can I do? And like what you said about falling in love with the process, that's literally something that I say like all the time because like you will not get your results just by focusing on how far you are from your results. Like the only way
Mm-hmm.
you got where you are today is by things you did yesterday, day before, and how many days before. But it's and once you start to focus on like being present and focusing on this day, that has
Mm-hmm.
been like for me it has been life changing because then I rather than think like oh my gosh I have to do so much work for these few months or like this year, I just focus on getting the best I to do the best I can today, and then beat myself next day. I just get better like day
Mm-hmm.
by day. Like one thing I did was I started like tracking my habits, and I would look at how much percentage wise I would finish like each month, and then each month I would try to beat the previous month, and I created like a game where I was like becoming addicted to be like oh my gosh I have to finish, and then like then I put it to the place where it was if I would do 90% that would be like really good, and to get to 100 I would really have to push myself, and then my goal was to get to like the green day where like all the habits are green, and then to get the
Mm-hmm.
streak of green days and have like the best result of like how many days I can get in a row of green days. And I would just like make it as a game, and I would be so focused on that game that I just didn't have time for anything else. Not in a way that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to have time for anything else, but I was so in the moment, like being present, which is another thing that I have heard you talk a lot about, is to being present. That like I also noticed that I would feel happier as well because I was present, and I would sit at the table and I'm like, I feel happy. And I'm like, I don't know why, but I'm like, I feel happy today. And like because I think many times we want to feel happy. You said it as a goal, but actually the way I explain happiness, it's like a byproduct of you working on
It is.
yourself, you getting better. And then one day you wake up and you feel happy and you don't know why. But actually it's
Mm-hmm.
because of all the work you did on yourself and you're moving ahead. Um so like that's something that I have I don't know, just through my own journey, I'm like, wow, this is so amazing. You can change so much when you stop focusing on results. Like usually what I say is set a goal, create like the baby steps you have to take to get there, and forget
Mm-hmm.
about the goal. Focus on the things you have to do today, and you will get there. There's no question. And then once in a while, you can reflect, look back on how far you are, adjust the goal, or maybe not the goal, but like adjust the action steps or see whether it's working or not, and just go forward. But if you every day sit and you're like, let's say when it comes to let's say losing weight, oh my gosh, I lost no weight today. It's not working. And then you'll just do it like every day. Like you will not get results because you will start to focus on, like, again, you're going to focus on the negatives rather than focusing on putting the work in today. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
I know it's been like really helpful for me. And it's really simple. Like it's nothing too
Mm-hmm.
complex if you think about it. It's like, okay, so focus on today. Set a goal, create steps, and focus on today. Done.
Yeah, exactly. I love to like tell the way I teach and the way I follow it. For me, it's focusing on the why. So even
Mm,
if the how changes, which it always does, like there will be challenges, there
yeah,
will be blocks, there will be things to learn. But if I focus on the why, like I focus on every day I wake up and I'm like, okay, if I want to help other people, master themselves and I want them to raise their energy and vibration, I'm like, okay, if I did one thing today that helped someone to better their life or raise their energy or whatever it is, then I know that I did like a step towards my dreams and then like my goals. And I think the outcomes as well, they will change. And so I always tell my clients to just focus on the why and that vision that you have, but just know that the how will come. Like
yeah.
things will change, steps will change, things can come that we don't even notice or even dream of. But if you focus on the why and the bigger mission, it will be so much easier just doing things every day to be of service is what I
How
focus
do
on.
you how do you approach the bad days?
I just push them as like a stepping stone, as like learning how to cope with my state and learning how to shift my state. And so I think that's what I've learned a lot from Tony Robbins and I've learned from my mentor is having the tools to change my state. In any moment, I like it's about feeling the feelings and feeling whatever I need in that bad day, but then how do I let go and how do I choose a new state? And I think that is a really big thing for self empowerment is having your whatever techniques everyone has, they're different. Just being like, okay, I feel this today. I accept myself for it. I forgive myself. But now I want to choose the other way because that is going to take me to my goals. And feeling, upset or feeling anxious or whatever it is, fearful, it's just going to take me away from my goal.
I actually like what you said about, in a way, like it's just a practice for you to shift your state. Like it's not a
Mm-hmm.
bad day, it's just like another day, it's a practice. Maybe it's like a
Exactly.
test. Um, but like and and like those are the days that actually matter the most, because it's easy to do whatever
Mm-hmm.
you need to do on the days that are like everything goes according to the plan. Well, yay, like that's, it's like there's not too much challenge when it comes to that. You're still doing things maybe that you don't usually do, but if everything is going perfect, then it's not as hard. um
Mm-hmm.
or I should say fun.
Yeah.
But like when you start to have those hard days, those are the days when you can, um well, first create bigger gap between yourself and others, but also between your old self and your like new self. That's where you
Mm-hmm.
actually distinguish the most, or build that gap the widest, because on bad days it's like adding tiny bits, but on good days it's adding tiny bits, but on bad days that's when you take like big leap to move forward, because that's when most of the people are like, okay, so today is not the day, I'm gonna continue tomorrow. Which is like, I think it's okay sometimes to have those days and you stop. It happens, we're human. But like another thing that I have learned is, don't do it more than one day. It's because
Mm-hmm.
then you start to build a new habit of getting back to your old ways. So like if you have a bad day and you don't overcome yourself, first, don't beat yourself up about it. um, it's just like another learning lesson. Like for me, if I have a bad day, I just sit down and I reflect on it, and I'm like, okay, so why didn't I get up and get that done? Um, and then how I can make sure that next time I actually do that. So that's been really helpful with like those bad days, and just making sure I am better at them the next time, because they are coming. It's not like you can avoid them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like what?
I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, I was just gonna say, like, for me, when I have a bad day or I wake up like, oh, I don't want to do anything today, for me, it's being aware of what I need to change myself. So, like, for me, it would be meditation. My absolute favorite tool is meditation. So, I would get myself like, okay, if I'm having a bad day, all I'm going to do is meditate because I know once I meditate, I'm going to be fine. And so, everyone has its own practice. It could be movement, it could be journaling, it could be just writing everything out. Whatever it is, just find that one thing that will help you in that day. And I think that's for me, like, if it's a bad day, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to do 1% today and I'm going to do my meditation because I know if I do that, I'm good to go. So it's having that empowering like tool.
How has meditation helped you, or like how did you get into it?
So I started getting into it. I started practicing with like priming and stuff back in October, but really into meditation, I would say December, where I did guided meditations on YouTube. It was like 15 minutes. I was like, okay, I can do 15 minutes, you know? And then once it was December 31st and I saw this YouTube video, I don't remember by who it was. And he said, just pick one thing that you're going to do for the rest of the 2021 every single day that you know will get you closer to your goal. And I said, okay, the Mia that I see in my vision, she's meditating. So I'm going to meditate every single day. So I started January meditating every single day. Now I do it twice a day, but it's because I started doing that and committing to that. I see that meditation has brought me so much inner peace and also so much distance from my thoughts. So when I have a thought, I know I am not my thoughts and I can just let go. And I think meditation has brought me that mindfulness and that just staying present and like clearing my head in the morning is the best feeling ever because I start my day with a clear head and I'm not bringing yesterday's worries or fears or thoughts into this day.
Do you do still like guided meditations, or you do like no guided?
So now I do both. When I feel like it, I'm gonna do a guided. When I feel like it, I'm just gonna put maybe some like frequency music behind in the background, or sometimes I've died silence. But for me, silence ones are still the hardest ones. You know, getting that inner voice to shut
Yeah.
up. That is the hardest one. But I think it was a process because at first I only did guided every single day, guided meditation. I didn't have that courage to do by myself. Now I'm feeling more and more called to do either music or just silence. So I think it's just a journey of where you feel comfortable going.
Yeah, and also like one thing that I was reading about when it comes to like self mastery and self control is that doing meditation, even if it's like 5 minutes a day where you just sit down and do it yourself, it's really helpful with like self control, because that's when you like
Mm-hmm.
you said, you become aware of your thoughts, and also you you practice, even if it's only 5 minutes, but if you do it daily, it's huge. You practice that when you catch a thought, you like release it, or you get back in the present, and like you just do
Mm-hmm.
it enough times, even in those 5 minutes, where you are able to first raise awareness, but also get more in control of yourself, because now you start to see things. And like
Mm-hmm.
that's what I usually tell people. Many times people are skeptical about meditation, and I tell them like it's not for everybody. Sometimes I recommend them to do like Wim Hof breathing, because it's
Mm-hmm.
still something similar. But I know for me, when I started off, I didn't like meditation, but I enjoyed doing like Wim Hof breathing, so I was doing that. um but like, also what I say is like, don't do it for like hours at first. Like you will just not be able to do it. You're gonna do
Yeah.
it one day and you're like, okay, I'm done, I'm not enjoying this. I just tell them like, sit for 5 minutes and like just focus on being present and just focus on the breath, or like the basics. And don't like overthink it. If you have a day when you just sit and you just think all the time, like, that's okay. It's like you're practicing.
Mm-hmm.
So like, even like 2 minutes, if you start off and you're like really don't want to do it, like do 2 minutes every day. um
Mm-hmm.
or and like another thing is that relaxation. So let's say when you finish the day, which I was surprised how is that helpful with like the self-control, where let's say when you finish the day, you have a few minutes when you relax and you do nothing. And it doesn't have to be huge. You can just lay in bed and just play some song in the background or something like that. But it's also like really helpful when it comes to like self-control. um but yeah, maybe what are your next steps, and or maybe what you're working towards, or what people can expect from you in the future? Some sneak peeks on stuff you're working on.
Okay, so speak peaks. I'm working on a mini course, which I have a few ideas to do mini courses, to be, give something to others who don't want to invest in a 3-month program right away, but also something that's been on my heart, I think, since 2015 has been my YouTube channel, which I still haven't launched, but I'm gonna do it one day. I will get there. But yeah, I want to
When
like
can
create.
people expect the first video?
Okay, that is putting a deadline. I like it. Yeah, I would want to do it in May. So
Okay.
basically I will upgrade my program in the future to a more bigger, more in-depth program, have mini courses, have my YouTube, and I also want to create like a membership in the end where, it's a mindset mastery membership platform for
And you also
anyone.
have a book, right?
Yes, I have co-authored a
Yeah.
book this year, but my dream is to write my own biography one day. So that is on the list, but there's so many things on my vision board that I can't even begin to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge and you have so many things you want to work on to just be like, okay, I focus
Yeah.
on this right now and the rest can wait. I'm the same. Like at first I wanted to do so many things and they ended up doing nothing.
Mhm.
Then I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna focus on these and the rest can wait. And I'm just gonna
Mhm.
get this done and then I'll think about the next thing. And it's been like really helpful for me. Right.
I
So
think it can also like change. Like you have some plan, and then 2 months later, like you will have a totally different plan because some idea came, and you're like, okay, I will chase that now. I think I would have never thought, I want to maybe create mini courses, or I also want to create like some shop. And I'm like, I never have thought, but they came, so I'm doing that now. And I think that's how I say the how can change, but just focus on the why, and then the steps will change also. So it's good to focus on one thing and then just focus whatever comes next.
yeah, and I think it's like being flexible. That's like
Mm-hmm.
really important. Being
Exactly.
able to adjust, especially nowadays when everything is happened changing by minutes. So that's
Yeah.
been like really helpful. Even like with social media and posting, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many things to learn. And then by the time you learn them, they're changing again. And I'm like, oh
Yes,
geez.
exactly.
So yeah,
Yeah.
well, thank you for this conversation. It was really, really interesting and I really enjoyed it. And like once you will get your first video, I'm gonna post it as well so that people can go and give you some support on your first video. So
Thank you.
which will be probably in like a bit over a week if we're talking about May.
Okay, well, in the month of May, so we'll see which May.
Okay.
But I will do it. I will get it done. I already said it now. So,
Yeah, that's why I asked you about the date.
yeah. Well, thank you for having me. It was really nice to be the guest, and I hope everyone in you're listening enjoyed this conversation and got something
Yeah,
out
I
of it
think
too.
they will get like a lot of value out of it, so that wouldn't be a question.
Yeah.
So, all
Yeah.
right. Thank you for
Yeah.
coming.
Of course. Thank you.